On our journey into a modern police state, the biggest signpost I've seen yet is not Chicago school districts saying parents can't pack their children's school lunches because they're not trusted. No, it's not even the face scanning cameras going up on street corners or even the military now engaged in domestic law enforcement. It's got to be the TSA and these radiation baking scanners and the groping that goes on. And I've seen all these headlines. Girl 6 frisked by security guards at U.S. airport. Well, I tend to agree with what I saw last night with Geraldo Rivera when he pointed out this is not frisking, this is an assault. And I've had district attorneys on from San Francisco and other places that say if they saw things like what happened to little Anna, that they would charge the TSA minion with sexual assault. Joining us via video Skype is Selena Drexel, the mother of Anna Drexel, the little 6-year-old who politely went through that ordeal but then broke down crying afterwards. And, of course, Dr. Todd Drexel was also traveling with his wife, Selena Drexel, and their other children. And joining us via video Skype from Bowling Green, Kentucky, is Selena Drexel. Selena, thank you for coming on.
Hi, thank you, Alex.
Well, so much has happened, and I've seen other TV interviews and radio interviews you've done where they basically ask the questions. Out of the gates, before I ask my questions, what are you most concerned with the ordeal that you and your family went through, and why are you giving interviews to the media?
Well, the reason that the message that we're trying to get out is that this has to stop, preferably for everybody with the groping, but especially for children, because, I want to believe that the TSA, in theory, would be well-intentioned to try to keep passengers safe while they're, in the course of a 2 or 3 hour flight. But I'm interested in keeping children safe when they're on the ground as well. And the methods that they have in place right now are setting kids up to be vulnerable to child predators who would take advantage of a child who's then been conditioned to ignore that feeling of wrongness, that uneasy feeling you get when someone's touching you in an inappropriate manner. If you have frequent flyer children that are then conditioned to accept this, you're setting them up to be vulnerable to child predators, and it has to stop.
Well, I remember seeing reports a few months ago with top child psychologists going on the news and saying this is training children that authority figures can molest them. And Governor Jesse Ventura has had them grab his genitals through the pants. Ron Paul has talked about them squeezing his genitals. I've had guests on where they've stuck their hands into their pants and squeezed their underwear. I mean, a sworn police officer can't randomly do that at a park. How can these federal minimum wage people do this? I mean, the sky's the limit if they get away with this.
I don't know. I don't remember signing anything when I bought my ticket saying that I was giving up my constitutional rights, and certainly not that of my children. And so I'm not sure how this is allowed.
Well, Mrs. Drexel, I don't go to the doctor a lot for checkups because I don't, frankly, like the doctor doing the things they do. In the few checkups I've had, I can't imagine what it's like for a 6-year-old girl. I mean, I have a 6-year-old daughter. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and they're both very spunky and smart and outgoing. But when they're around strangers they don't know, especially authority figures in uniforms and things, they tend to hang onto my leg and get behind me. That's just normal instinct. I don't think my daughters would have held up as well as your daughter did. I mean, as soon as they began to whimper and cry, I would probably do what any mammal would do when its young is under attack. I would attack, and then I'd be charged as some type of terrorist.
Well, it's pretty hard to keep my cool, but the supervisor you don't see on the camera was reasonably intimidating, and he was intimidating to me and let me know that there would be a big deal if I made a fuss.
So if you didn't load on the cattle car, there was going to be a problem. But we know at the end of the cattle train, historically, is where the real problems begin. Better to fight here on the platform at the trains. Now you mentioned that on ABC, but they basically cut in over you. Specifically, talk about, because 90% of communication is nonverbal. Tell us about the nonverbal bowing up that you went through. I've been through that as well, where they let you know if you cause trouble. I mean, take your time. Describe what you saw.
Well, the female agents that were ushering folks through the scanners, I've been through a lot of TSA procedures. We're frequent flyers. We travel, 4 or 5 times a year is what I consider to be, reasonably frequent. And in most other cities that we've been in, the TSA has been reasonably, accommodating. Yes, we know we have to do this, and they're reasonably polite. This particular crew was fairly aggressive and intimidating. I did ask questions. I did request alternates and was refused and not given any information. The TSA supervisor was sitting behind a desk and, overseeing this. And I recognized that he was the one in charge and protested to him off camera, both before and after the video started rolling, and was refused. And he let me know. He physically got into my personal space. He was, maybe 6 foot tall. I don't know how tall he was, but he was a lot bigger than I was, and let me know that, just don't. So.
Well, that's why none of my children have flown. Now, my wife has not flown since all of this, because not just myself, but my wife, I don't think, would have the control that you did. And we commend your control, because you shot the video, you exposed what they were doing, and to have them get in your space. Describe how he got in your space and exactly how he was looking at you for folks that are out there listening.
Well, he didn't use profanity or anything like that. I mean, he was, technically professional, but in a police, I'm in control type of, demeanor. And so I'm not particularly angry with this crew. I think they were following the instructions that they'd been given. It's the instructions that I have a problem with. It's the fact that we're even doing this at all is what I have a problem with, and I would like to get changed.
But specifically then, I mean, is it accurate to say he did that kind of sticking his chest out, arms out, getting in your space, kind of like a drill sergeant? I mean, how did he bow up to you?
Sure, exactly.
Yeah, just classic, get on the cattle car, shut up. Meanwhile, I hear a child on the video, it looks like separate from your daughter, saying, I don't want him to touch me, I don't want him to touch my clothes. Was that some of your other children or someone else's children?
Right. The video picks up about halfway through the process. I went through the pat-down first and was actually given a lighter version of the pat-down than Anna was given. When I managed to get my phone back and hand it over to Todd, he was also holding the 2-year-old, who you hear on the video, trying to manage all the other, our belongings that were coming through the conveyor belt. Other passengers were shoving it on the floor, shoving it aside. Being in New Orleans, I was concerned about theft, trying to make sure that, not only is my daughter safe, my other 2 children are taken care of, plus no one's running off with our stuff. And so it was fairly chaotic. I think we managed it, reasonably well. That is Caroline, my youngest, you hear on the video. And it's kind of comical. Some of the news agencies have attributed her statements to Anna. And I don't, maybe it's because I'm a parent. I don't particularly think that a 2-year-old sounds the same as a 6-year-old. She was saying she didn't want them to take her clothes. But then she changed the subject and wanted to use the iPhone to play Angry Birds. And then the third comment that she made, she wanted her shoes back because they had, we had made her give up her shoes to go through the inspection, and she wanted those back. And so those are the comments that you hear her making. Anna only said yes, ma'am, a couple of times, and pretty much was doing what she was told.
Well, ma'am, we've studied it. This is social engineering, social conditioning, that we're basically all criminals. The government can do whatever it wants. It's a federal power grab, violating the 9th and 10th Amendment. To have unsworn federal officers, much less sworn. I mean, just a few years ago, the FBI had to get permission to come into your town or county. Now they're running most of the investigations. Same thing with this new federal bureaucracy. Were you aware that the TSA is now running highway checkpoints and checkpoints at train stations and bus stations?
I am now. I know that now. I didn't know that before. And I take responsibility for not educating myself before we went on this trip. I was used to the previous processes. I had heard about, had heard about the new naked scanners that they were doing, but I thought that they would use those only if they couldn't use, some other technology, or if they were profiling someone and thought that they needed to take an extra look. As far as pat downs for children, I had heard that there was an age limit of 13 and up. It's not clear to me, it's been a few days since this has happened, and I've tried to do some online research to find out exactly what the rule is. And I don't think it's...
Well, just so you know, they told the Washington Post in November of last year and put on their own TSA website that children under 12 would not be given enhanced pat-down. In fact, let's put that headline up for prisonplanet.tv viewers. We also then wrote an article about it. TSA caught lying about pat-downs of children. Yes, they're constantly changing their story. If you go back to November of last year, ma'am, this all started in the media when one of my crew members, Michelle, went to Colorado to ski with her 8-year-old daughter and her 1.5-year-old daughter with their family. On their way back, a man groped her and squeezed her private parts and everything and tried to go in the waistband. Then the man tried to grope the 8-year-old and the year-old. She demanded a woman. But still, I mean, if a man gropes you and sexually assaults you, or a woman does, a person's a person. There's the USA Today article from last year. No enhanced pat-downs for kids, TSA says. So this is all psychological warfare. I saw Governor Ridge, head of Homeland Security, 8 years ago, say their plan was to finally have worker ID cards nationwide. TSA will be in every mall, highway, federal toll roads, and that they're just conditioning us to line up and basically be strip searched. And this is what authoritarians always do. In communist China, in Russia, in Nazi Germany, they first have you show papers, then they teach you to put their hands on you. And the TSA themselves, agents are fired if they have radiation concerns from the scanners. They're fired if they don't want to do this, the groping. So they're creating cadres of people that will carry this out. And the reason I'm basically trying to fill you in on this is you're very influential, obviously, now doing these interviews. And if you haven't seen the info that I just covered, I'd love to send you the historical evidence.
Yeah, I'd love to get any more that I could get. Yeah, I'll also mention that they're not changing gloves in between pat-downs.
Oh, they're not changing gloves.
They didn't change gloves between the last folks that went through and us.
Now, watching the video, it looks like that they're doing the into the waistband, into the pants. Did that happen to your daughter, Anna?
It did. They touched her underwear. But let me clarify. I don't want to insult the feelings of or invalidate the experience of anyone who has truly been sexually molested or assaulted. I don't think that that's exactly what happened here. I believe they did go too far, but to equate, a child being physically molested or, sodomized or something horrifying, I don't equate the two. What I'm trying to get across is to prevent that, from being possible by delivering a consistent message for kids that hands off always.
But that is I've had district attorneys on here on the broadcast from big cities like San Francisco, and they've pointed out that if you touch someone on the outside of their pants and touch their genitals, it's a misdemeanor. And if you go inside the pants, it is a sexual assault felony. And so, all the time we see...
Maybe so then, but... my husband is a gynecologist by trade, and he would say that there's a difference.
Well, certainly, lined up in a cattle car,
and what happened to Anna would be considerably different. But it doesn't minimize the fact that this is completely wrong to do to children.
Sure. Here's my point. Let's say hypothetically you're walking through a grocery store parking lot at 10 o'clock at night, picking up some groceries, and a man runs up in the night and grabs your breast. He would get a felony conviction for that and spend about 5 years in prison. And so, sure, they do it under the official umbrella. My only issue is that's how Nazi Germany got going, because they were in uniforms. They thought it was okay to work people to death and strip search them and march them into showers.
Yeah, that may be true. Yes.
Why do you think, then, they're doing this? I mean, is it political correctness that if the terrorists are supposedly from the Middle East, but we, don't strip search them? Because, some people are being taken behind closed doors and being strip searched.
Well, I'm not sure that we can say that the terrorists are exclusively from the Middle East. We found American citizens that have, gone overseas to train or, had other ideologies that set them up for being internal terrorists, if you will. And this is a type of people that value their own no higher than a firecracker. They'll blow themselves up. Or,
sure, but hypothetically, I or anybody else could go attack a shopping mall right now. You could do that. I mean, do we set up checkpoints outside? I mean, do we set it up outside your door, down the street? I mean, no amount of tyranny can ever keep us safe.
No, and we're never going to be able to eliminate risk, and I don't think we want to. I mean, sure, it would be nice to not have to worry about things, but the state, a police state, to avoid all possible wackos, it's not realistic, and that's not the country that I want to live in.
Well, sure, exactly, because historically it is government police states that kill and enslave more people than any Ted Bundy ever could dream of. I mean, our founders told us the big danger is a government that tells you we're going to take your rights away for security. You better run.
Well, I think a big danger also is people that sit by and do nothing and accept it.
You mean people that basically go along with this?
Sure.
Well, that's why we want to commend you for what you've done. Now, did I hear correctly when you were on ABC News that they also told you not to videotape?
No, they never told me not to videotape. I was taking a risk by videotaping it, and had they told me not to, I probably wouldn't. But they never said not to.
But, I mean, you have a right. I mean, they're all surveilling you with cameras. They can't say for security reasons you can't videotape them. Also, I want to cover this point, and we're going to break here. If I keep you just a few more minutes, but please try to start answering this. What type of precedent does it set, though, that if they're going to be groping us now, what could happen in the future?
I can only speculate as to what's going to happen in the future. I would prefer that it stop now and we head back in the other direction.
Where are you going from here?
Well, I'm investigating what our options are right now in terms of making the TSA accountable to their own, published standards. So I'm currently investigating options right now. I've not ruled anything out.
Selena Drexel, the mother of little Anna, who went through this ordeal. We're going to break for just a couple of minutes. I'd like to spend a few more minutes with you on the other side, if we can, to talk about how this affected your daughter, how she's doing now, how long did she cry after this ordeal. And we really appreciate your courage to come out and speak about this and also videotape it. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The mother of little Anna is our guest for another 4 or 5 minutes. How did your daughter take this? I heard reports that she broke down crying after the ordeal. I think my daughters would break down crying right there on the spot.
Anna's a tough girl. She stood there and took it, and she knew Mom was right there and wouldn't let anything, horrible, even further happen to her. So she was okay to, as long as I was standing there. And she did break down right afterward, thinking that she had done something wrong. Once we got on the plane, we had a lot of explaining to do. Why does Mom always say don't let anyone touch you? And then now we've done this. Now it's okay. When in fact I said no, it's not okay. You're right to feel this way. You're right to feel violated. It is not okay for anyone to touch you like this. And Mom is going to try to do something about this. Trying to explain this also to a 9-year-old that this is what happened to your sister, and this is this is what you saw, and this is why we feel it was wrong. We did a lot of talking on the plane, but after it was over, after we got home, she got back into her normal routine. She's moved on. She's okay with it. She's not sitting in a dark room rocking back and forth in the corner. That's
certainly good news.
It's not her nature.
But we need to get a class action lawsuit going so this type of abuse stops.
Right.
My concern is this. You obviously are having a measured response. A lot of other Americans are basically having Stockholm syndrome, and I know you sound like a very educated person. You know what that is, but for those that don't, people get abused, so they make excuses for why it's happening, and that's what the social engineers are counting on to basically set the precedent that government can give us forced inoculations, government. Have you heard about them taking babies' blood secretly at birth now for 40 years in the U.S.?
No, I've not heard of that. And in my husband's line of work delivering babies, I just he hasn't heard of that either.
Well, see, no, they tell him it's going to the health department for a blood test. But
okay, yes.
But it's actually going.
So it does go to the state. The heel stick that they do within 24 hours of birth, that does go to the state.
Well, all I'm saying is find out how deep the rabbit hole goes. I got secret documents 15 years ago where it really goes, Cold Springs Harbor Eugenics Lab, and it does have dual uses. But I just wanted you to go look it up. It's in the Associated Press now that it's actually being sold to industry. My issue is there's a lot of power grabbing going on that most people aren't aware of, even who work professionally around it. In closing, my concern is, if you say no to their groping, they then throw you out, but then claim you refused the screening and fine you for $11,000. So, I mean, that's really scary. What's your view on that?
Well, I'd like to see him collect that from as many people, as would refuse it. I don't think it's constitutional, and I think it would get thrown out. I would hope that it would.
Selena, to protect other people, you don't sound like a litigious person, but to protect other people, I think you might want to look at a civil rights violation lawsuit or visit with the district attorney of the county where this happened, because I've had several district attorneys on who say they would charge people for what they did to your daughter. I think it's important to go ahead and go after these people so that they don't continue to do it.
Right, and like I said, I've not ruled out any options. What I would really like to see, attacking the TSA is I think only going to put them on the defensive and have them dig their heels in even further. I would really ultimately like to see other groups work with the TSA to develop screening procedures that are acceptable, ones that would be endorsed by parents, other special populations like the disabled.
Well, Selena, just to be clear, though, because I know you're a reasonable person, so you're trying to be reasonable, the TSA follows orders. We have continuity of agenda all over the Western world. This is happening. This is an agenda, and they don't want to be reasonable. We really appreciate you spending time with us. God bless you. A lot of great points. And everybody cares about you and your family. God bless.